All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on a concept that is absolutely critical in the world of finance: beneficial ownership. You see these incredibly complex company structures, right? It's like a maze of shell corporations and trusts. You look at the paperwork, you see one name, and you just have to wonder, who's really pulling the strings here? Who's the person actually benefiting from all this? Well, answering that question is exactly what we're going to tackle today.
And the key to cutting through all that fog, it's identifying the beneficial owner, or the BO, as you'll often hear it called. And look, this isn't just some nice to have or a bit of good practice. No, it's an absolutely fundamental requirement to keep the whole financial system clean and, secure.
So here's what we've got on tap. We'll kick things off with why this is such a big deal. Then we'll meet the beneficial owner, figure out who that actually is. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of how you find them, talk about some common mistakes to avoid, touch on when the rules don't apply, and then wrap it all up. Okay, so first things first, why is everyone so focused on this? What's the big deal? Well, it all boils down to one central problem: hidden money. And with hidden money comes anonymous control, which is where things can get really messy. And when I say the stakes are high, I mean they are incredibly high. We're talking about regulators mandating this stuff to fight really serious crimes: money laundering, terrorist financing, you name it. The whole point is to pierce through those complicated legal structures and find out who's actually accountable at the end of the day. For a bank, wow, getting this wrong can mean massive, massive fines and just total reputational ruin. That's why it's a non-negotiable part of their policy. Okay, so that's the problem. Now let's talk about the solution. And that brings us to the star of our show today: the beneficial owner. So here's the official definition you'll see. The two words you really need to latch onto there are natural person and ultimately. It means you have to look past the company name on the account, go beyond all the legal entities, and find the actual real-life human being who's either making money off this thing or calling the shots. And this right here, this is the golden rule. Seriously, if you remember only one thing from our chat today, make it this: a beneficial owner is always, always, always a person, an individual, a human being. You can't just list another company as the BO. I don't care how many layers of ownership there are. You've got to keep digging down that rabbit hole until you hit a person. Okay, that's the theory. But how do banks actually do this? How do they find this person in the real world? Well, the rules change a little bit depending on what kind of company or entity you're looking at. A lot of the time, the hunt for a BO starts with some pretty simple math, just looking at percentages. For a partnership or a regular company, the magic number is usually 10%. If you're entitled to more than 10% of the profits or capital, boom, you're a BO. For something like an unincorporated association, that number bumps up to 15%. It's a really clear, easy place for investigators to start. But, and this is a huge but, just looking at the ownership percentage is only half the story. You could have someone who owns, say, only 5%, but if they have the power to appoint most of the directors, or they can basically veto major decisions, guess what? They're a beneficial owner too. This is so important to get. Effective control can sometimes matter even more than who owns the most shares. Now, trust can get really tricky, right? But the process is actually pretty straightforward if you just follow the steps. You have to identify everybody who's involved. Who created the trust? That's the settler. Who's managing it? That's the trustee. Who's benefiting from it? Especially anyone with a 10% or more interest. And crucially, is there anyone else pulling the strings from behind the scenes? It's really all about mapping out that entire power structure. So, knowing the rules is one thing, but putting them into practice without messing up? That's a whole other ballgame. And, regulators see the same mistakes being made over and over and over again. So let's flip this around and look at what not to do. Okay, this is the big one. We've already touched on this, but it is so important it's worth saying again. Sometimes you'll see paperwork where another company's idea is listed as the BO. That is a massive, immediate red flag. The rule is absolute, folks. Find the human. Here's another classic mistake: listing an authorized signatory as the BO. Just because someone's name is on the account and they can sign checks, that doesn't make them the owner. They're likely just an employee, a representative. You always have to ask the next question: do they also happen to own more than 10%? Do they have that ultimate control we talked about? If the answer is no, then they are not the BO. And there are other pitfalls too that create these huge compliance gaps. Things like not updating the BO details when the ownership of a company changes. Or maybe you identify one BO but miss the other two who also meet the criteria. These might sound like little administrative slip-ups, but trust me, they can lead to some really serious consequences. All right, so like with pretty much any regulation, there are a few specific cases where these intensive identification rules don't actually apply. You've got a few types of entities that are exempt, and it's usually because their ownership is already out in the open. Think about a big company listed on a stock exchange. Their ownership is public knowledge, or a simple proprietorship, where the owner and the business are basically the same person. Government agencies can be exempt too, but, and this is the key thing, you can't just assume. These exemptions have to be applied strictly, by the book. Okay, let's bring this all together. We've talked about the what, the why, and the how. Let's zoom back out for a second and really hit home on the big picture, why all of this really, really matters. Here's the main takeaway: identifying the beneficial owner. It's not just a formality. It is not just another box you have to tick on a form. It is a serious legal and regulatory obligation. And getting it right has huge implications for the safety and the integrity of our financial institutions. So when it all comes down to it, the compliance checklist is pretty simple. Did you identify the right people, the real human owners? Is all your paperwork and verification complete and in order? And do your records paint an accurate picture of who really owns and controls this thing? Getting a yes to all of those, that's the ultimate goal. And that's why all this effort is so worth it. Because when you get this right, you're not just keeping the regulators off your back. You're actively protecting your bank from massive risk. You're building a stronger compliance culture, and you're doing your part to uphold the integrity of the entire financial system. It makes it more trustworthy and stable for all of us. So, I'll leave you with this final thought. Think of all these rules not as a burden, but as a shield that protects our financial system from people who want to exploit it. And it really makes you think, what happens when that shield is gone?